to ASEAN People Speak, Season 5. I'm Regine Jessica Abuel, your host for this podcast. For our second episode, we will examine how 2025 US tariff hikes are reshaping the ASEAN economies and the direct consequences for human rights. We are joined by a longtime educator, researcher, and advocate for social and economic justice. He currently serves as the executive director of Ibon Foundation, an independent non government organization that has been providing research, information, and education services to people's movements in the Philippines and abroad since 1978. He is also a board member of the Civil Society Network Council for People's Development and Governance, or CPDG, and the alternative media outfit Altermedia. He is a fellow of the Center for People Empowerment and Governance, or CENPEG, and the Center for Anti-Imperialist Studies, or CAIS, as well as an editor of the online news magazine Bulatlat. Since 1990, he has been an active educator to people's organizations, as well as a resource person for schools, NGOs, the government, and media. Everyone, let us all welcome our second guest for this season, Mr. Jose Enrique Africa, or Sunny. Hello, Sunny.
Hi, Regine. Thanks for the invitation. Hope I can share something useful to everyone.
Yes, and we're very much excited to have you in our second episode for this season. Well, Sunny, I just want to say that we have an exciting topic right now, and it very much affects everybody because we're going to talk about economics, business, and something close to a lot of people, which is labor rights. So let's try to delve into the topic already by can you give us a background of the 2025 US tariff hikes and the resulting global trade tensions that affected ASEAN region and its industries, including the export dependent economy, especially for developing countries?
Right. Well, of course, we've just finished the 47th ASEAN Summit in Kuala Lumpur. I think that was quite important because that was the first time really that the United States gave us some clarity on what their plans are with the tariff situation in the region.
Mhm.
We can go into the details, but I think the most important point to realize is that since the first Trump administration, through the Biden administration, and especially in the second Trump administration, the US is becoming much more aggressive economically. It wants to sort of make sure that it gets the cheap labor and raw materials wants from other countries. It wants to make sure it has the markets for its products. And I think compared to previous decades, especially the early 1990s, 2000s, when there was a WTO, I think the US right now is being a bit more of a bully. I think that is
Mm.
the most important point to actually take away from how the ASEAN summit finished and the more or less for quote unquote trade deals President Trump negotiated. Not to be a spoiler, but I think the bad news is that the US seems to have gotten what it wants in terms
Mm.
of ensuring a market for its products, whether it's US manufacturers or natural gas or what have you. At the same time, it seems to have been able to assure that it will still get the cheap labor from its investments in the region, while actually not giving much space to ASEAN countries to industrialize. I think that's a bit damaging and worrying because it unfortunately affirms that the shift from the kind of biased multilateral system before the second Trump administration to the much more bullying bilateral transactional world economic system under the second Trump administration, I think it's a bit worrying because it has affirmed that so far the US is getting what it wants from ASEAN without
Mhm.
actually giving much space for domestic industrial development in the
Mhm.
ASEAN region. Of course, there is the question of why did the governments, especially recently of Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodia, and part of the Philippines, there is a question of why they agreed to that. That can be a point of discussion, but I think the bottom line is the US seems to be getting too much from ASEAN. ASEAN is not getting what it needs from the US. And I think that means we do have to get our domestic houses in order. It also means we have to get ASEAN in order to be able to sort of leverage whatever collective strength we could potentially have against an aggressive power like the United States.
And you've actually mentioned, Sunny, about ASEAN Summit in Kuala Lumpur, which just recently happened last October 26, 2025. And we understand that the US actually, at that time, finalized trade frameworks with several Southeast Asian countries. So that includes Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Thailand, which resulted in comparatively lower tariff rates, around 19 to 20% through bilateral negotiations. And you've mentioned a while ago that the US is getting what they want, but the ASEAN countries are not getting what they need and at the same time what they deserve. So we see like a very big disparity there. And what can you say about that then?
Okay, I think it's important to understand that the tariff game that lower is better that's not actually true. I
Okay.
know there's a lot of effort for the ASEAN countries to want market access to the United States. But
Mhm.
we have to be very clear. Market access to the US, it's vast consumer and industrial market, that only matters if ASEAN countries are actually producing something to sell to the United States. Unfortunately, after
Mhm.
30, 40 years of globalization, what has happened in too many ASEAN countries, we actually have non-ASEAN investors in the Philippines,
Mhm.
in the region, in Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodia. They're not actually ASEAN producers, but American or Japanese or Korean producers in our countries. Though tariffs would only be good for Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodia, the Philippines, and other ASEAN countries, though tariffs to the US will only be good if we were producing something to sell to the US to begin with. And unfortunately, I think that is where we've stumbled in the last round of quote unquote trade agreements negotiated, which they weren't. They were bullied by the United States. That's where the problem lies because what we should be looking for is not market access to the United States per se. What
Mhm.
we should be looking for is Vietnam strengthening Vietnamese industry? Is Thailand
Mhm.
strengthening Thai industry? Are Malaysia, Cambodia, and Philippines strengthening Malaysian, Cambodian, Philippine industry?
Mhm.
And if we're not doing that, low tariffs, access to the US market will not benefit ASEAN countries. And I think, case in point, after 30, 40 years of globalization, there has been a lot of foreign investment in our countries. But I think, with the exception perhaps of Singapore and Malaysia, I don't think any country in ASEAN can claim to have industrialized and by that measure developed in the last 40 years. So what we are actually facing right
Mhm.
now is more of an internal problem. Our countries, our individual governments have to put in place national industrial plans. And then those national industrial plans should be coordinated at the ASEAN level so we have more leverage in dealing with not just the US, but also China. And
Mhm.
then that's the only time that, talk about market access to the US or China, to whatever the agreement, that's the only time it's actually going to be meaningful. And, again, I don't mean to be a spoiler, but there really is not much to be said in terms of the
Mhm.
so-called lower tariffs the US is giving, because
Mhm.
the main beneficiaries from that will not primarily be our national economies. The main
Mhm.
beneficiaries are the foreign investors in our national economies. And if you run through the list of foreign investors in our national economies, they, surprise to surprise, are not actually ASEAN countries.
ASEAN
They're
countries.
so I think I think that's where the problem primarily lies right now.
And thank you for clarifying that, Sunny, because of course, it's different when you say lower tariff rates, but you've clarified actually that the lower tariff rates actually mean, and that's what you've just explained to us a while ago. And since you've already mentioned to us that it's actually not beneficial for the ASEAN economies, then we want to discuss now what is the human impact on this shifting trade patterns. We understand that we encounter job losses, wage pressures, and business survivals among micro, small, and medium enterprises. Can you tell us more about that?
I think micro, small, and medium enterprises of our national economies, I think more or less it's safe to assume they would be the backbone of any domestic industry, whether
Mhm.
Philippines,
Yes.
Vietnamese, Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodian industry. So where are our MSMEs right now in the shifting tariff environment? In all honesty, we're not in a very good place. We're not in a very good place because what countries like Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodia, and the Philippines have done, what they've done is give the US what it wants in terms of
Mm,
more access to US goods in our economies. At the same time, easier access for foreign investors in our economies to the United States.
mhm.
So where does that leave our MSMEs? The question is, for our MSMEs to develop into industrial large enterprises, they need to be protected. And the US and China and literally every industrialized country in the world, they develop their industrial base in MSMEs and in large enterprises from protection. So we're actually setting a bad
Mm,
precedent right now if um, out of desperation to somehow get market access to the United States, if out of that desperation, we've opened up our markets to the United States and prevented ourselves from protecting our MSMEs, that puts them in a bad place because MSMEs will not be able to grow into large industrial
mm,
enterprises without protection. And I think the bottom line impact of that is that at the economy wide level, we're not going to be building our national industries. On the
mhm.
contrary, we'll be opening up our economy to foreign investors who put their own firms and factories in economic zones in enclaves. Secondly, it's huge pressure on our MSMEs in desperately trying to compete with cheap imports. Unfortunately, a lot of
Mm,
the cheap imports, they drive down wages, they drive down working conditions to be able to produce as cheaply as possible to compete with cheaper foreign goods. And I think that pressure on our local MSMEs to compete on a lower price point by cheapening labor, by worsening working conditions, I think that will be working very strongly against our national workers. And of course, another key point I think also, unfortunately, another way to cheapen our products is to not be so keen on the environmental protections. It
yeah.
does cost resources to be more environment friendly in our production, but again, out of the compulsion in the market to compete with cheaper imports, if our MSCDs are also competing by worsening
Mhm.
environmental compliance on top of worsening labor compliance, that means that even our communities, our localities, will actually be the worse off for that. So I think it's not the US's fault in that regard. It's our government's fault. Our governments have to uphold the labor interests. Our governments have to uphold our environmental interests. More than that, our governments have to work together as ASEAN to uphold the collective regional interests against these big powers like the US, China, Europe, Japan, and other major industrial powers. They're not here to develop us. They're here to make money from us. We're here to profit from
Mm,
our labor resources. That's a given for them. It shouldn't be a given for us to give them what they want.
mm. And I guess I'd like to pick from what you said a while ago that this issue is not just, limited to labor or wage problems, but it also affects other aspects like environment, and it also deals a lot with the policies of each state in protecting not just laborers, but also the interest itself of each state by promoting their own nationals, and at the same time supporting the MSMEs, or micro, small, and medium enterprises, which are the backbones of each country's labor force. When we try to develop and support the MSMEs of every country, that's leaning towards the industrialization of that country. And once we take the support from them, it just opens a lot of problems, or like the gate for other for exports or from other countries to take advantage, because local products would now have to compete with products that are way cheaper, so they have to produce it in a cheaper way. Or
Yeah.
am I getting it?
Exactly that. And I think the worst thing that can happen to us is if we break, if we don't build a unity. Because the bottom line is, unfortunately, if ASEAN countries are in a race to the bottom with each other to provide the cheapest labor, the laxest environmental standards, the most open markets, that will favor the big industrialized powers like the US, China, Japan, Europe, South Korea, who will take advantage of the region, not to develop us
Mhm.
peripherally, but to benefit their own
Interest.
capital enterprises. I think that's such a key point to bear in mind. Individually, I mean, I know it's such a cliche. Individually, we are actually quite weak. I mean, even Indonesia, like the region's biggest country, Indonesia on its own will not be able to stand up to the US or China and other powers. But again, it's always said, collectively, we expanded also, added Timor-Leste already. Collectively, we will have much more leverage to deal with other countries, big powers, if we work together. But the
Yeah.
thing is, right now, we're not seeing that. What we're seeing is different countries trying to sort of be closer to the US, other countries trying to be closer to China. I'm kind of wondering now, what effort do we need for ASEAN countries to be close to each other so we can stand up to the US, China, Europe, and other countries that have used the region to enrich themselves from our cheap labor, from our cheap resources, from our captive markets? I think maybe we should get a lesson from that. Individually, we're very weak, but collectively, that's going to strengthen trade and investment policies to advance our collective labor interests, our collective environmental interests, and of course, our collective economic and national security interests. And the only way to protect, I think, the livelihoods of ASEAN country members, that's talking about all the Filipinos, Thai, Vietnamese, Cambodians, Malaysians, the only way to actually uphold the interests of our peoples is if our governments work together to uphold our national interests. If we're divided, guaranteed we're not going to develop either collectively or even individually.
Yeah, and I actually we that is like a very good springboard to our next topic. Aside from the things that you've mentioned, by building connections or common grounds among states in the ASEAN region, what then can you think that ASEAN can do to strengthen the regional trade policies to advance labor protection, inclusive of growth and the sustaining of ASEAN people's livelihoods amid a shifting trade dynamics in the region, and especially the pressures coming from different countries, especially from the Western and China as well.
Well, I think three major things that have to be done. We can run the podcast on the details, but three major things that can and should be done. First, we have to learn the lessons of the last 40 years of globalization. The last 40 years of globalization have been about ASEAN opening up to external big powers under the false illusion, all illusions are false, under the false promise that opening up to foreign trade and investment as a region will develop us. In the last
Mm.
40 years, there's not been an industrial breakout power in ASEAN. The last late great industrializers were probably South Korea and Taiwan, not in
Mhm.
ASEAN. How
Mhm.
did South Korea and Taiwan do that? By protecting themselves. In ASEAN, we have not seen that kind of protection of the national or ASEAN interest. On the contrary, over the last 40 years, we've been opened up to other countries. Case in point, the reason so many ASEAN countries are so worried about losing access to the US market is because over the last 40 years, they become so dependent on US firms in their countries, and they become so dependent on US firms in their countries exporting to the US market. So actually, that has been a major point of leverage of the US on ASEAN countries right now to get what it wants. So for us, let's not keep up with that error of opening up to others and make us dependent on them. So key point number one, learned from the last 30, 40 years of globalization, that hasn't worked for us. Key point number two, let's learn from how other countries have developed. Without fail, every developed country in the world, maybe about 25, 30 out of 200 countries in the world right now, they've developed because they advanced their domestic industrialization. There was a role for foreign firms to support that industrialization, but in the end, domestic industry had to be developed. Domestic industry meaning, high productivity, high technology products. So have to be things you pick up and drop on your foot. It could be artificial intelligence or software, anything that's high productivity, high technology, that is industrialization. That's such an important point because if we learn from the lesson of every developed country that they have to industrialize, that means we have to implement industrialization policies as well, which has always involved protection against large external powers, which has always involved the government intervening in the local economy to help MSMEs and local manufacturers, local industries. So second key point, let's learn from those that have developed. Let's industrialize by protecting, supporting nationals, not giving everything to foreign investors just so they come to us and then we think that we're developing just because they're here. That's not the case. Third point, it's hard to industrialize. It's going to take time. So how do you build public support for an industrialization project? The government has to ensure that everyone benefits, not just the few rich businessmen or few rich foreigners. The government has to ensure that every citizen in each of our countries benefits from that industrialization process. And there are only three major things only that it should do to make sure that our people benefit. First, from the jobs being created, they shouldn't be cheap jobs. They should be decent paying jobs in decent work environments. So have to guarantee that labor rights are protected in the industrialization process. Second important point, have to make sure that the environment is not devastated from industrializing because it's not actually good to industrialize, but you're polluting the rivers, polluting the air, generating mounds of toxic waste. That is not the way to go. It has to be through protecting the environment. And third, also completely within the power of the government, ensure public social services. Ensure that while industrializing, every citizen has full access to education, to health, to housing. And if they have that sort of guaranteed social services, then that is where it's the inclusivity of growth and development. That's where it comes from. So I think learn from the negative experience of globalization, learn from the positive experience of industrialization, and the government ensuring that in the industrialization and growth process, it provides the social services needed by every citizen, but also ensures that labor is protected and the environment is protected in that industrialization process. If we do those three things, it's not going to be overnight, but at least we will
Yes.
be on that path to developing our countries to improve ASEAN people's livelihoods and well-being.
Wow, that was very, very comprehensive. And thank you so much for summarizing it into 3 points, actually, Sunny. And I'm sure our listeners were able to pick those up, and you're very much able to explain it in a very comprehensive and insightful way as well. So thank you so much for sharing us your thoughts about our very wonderful topic for this episode. And I guess before we end, we would want to ask you, is there anything that you would like to promote? Your social media account, your website, organization, publications, or any upcoming projects, or anything that you would like to share to our viewers before we end this episode?
I'm not going to take up all our time. We've used it all up. But I think bottom line, follow Ebon. Ebon Foundation is on the major social media websites, Facebook, Twitter, X, all of that. So look for Ebon Foundation. We have a website. It's the first thing that's going to come out in your browsers. But also, please follow us on our social media accounts. And for those who might care, I do have a personal social media account, Sunny Africa, both on Facebook and on Twitter, but less on Twitter these days for a lot of
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely look for you and your and Ebon Foundation as well. Thank you so much, Sunny, for this wonderful episode. Join us again next week. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on Spotify to stay updated and never miss an episode. You can also stay connected with us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube by following at WGSCNHRMEC. For in-depth information, you can also visit our website at cnhrmec.org. Thank you so much, guys, for listening to us today. We hope you were able to get a ton of information and insights from our wonderful speaker. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged. Bye.